The scream tore through the quiet afternoon like a hawk diving for prey, shattering the peace of the small Montana town of Willow Creek. Eliza Parker clutched desperately at the wooden porch rail as two men with bandanas covering their faces dragged her down the steps of her father's store. Her blonde hair had come loose from its pins, whipping wildly around her face as she fought against their iron grip. "Let me go," she shouted, kicking at the taller raider who merely laughed and tightened his grip on her arm. "Feisty one, ain't she?" he called to his companion. "Worth more than whatever's in that safe, I reckon." The year was 1876, and the lawlessness that had swept through the West after the Civil War had finally reached their previously peaceful town. Eliza's father had warned her about the gang of raiders that had been terrorizing nearby settlements, but neither of them had expected the men to be bold enough to strike in broad daylight. "My father will come after you," Eliza threatened, though she knew it was an empty threat. Her father was away in Helena on business, leaving her to mind the general store alone. That morning, he'd promised to return within 2 days. Now, Eliza wondered if she would still be alive by then. The second raider, a squat man with yellowed teeth visible beneath his red bandana, yanked harder on her arm. "Your pa ain't coming, girl, and if he tries, he'll get a bullet for his trouble." They were dragging her toward the hitching posts where 3 horses waited, stomping impatiently. Eliza knew if they got her on those horses, she would never see Willow Creek again. Tales of women taken by raiders rarely ended well, and those that did survive often wished they hadn't. As they reached the edge of the wooden boardwalk, the crack of a rifle shot split the air. The bullet splintered the wood near the shorter raider's foot, stopping both men in their tracks. "That was a warning," called a deep voice from down the street. "The next one goes between your eyes." Eliza twisted to see a tall figure on horseback, a Winchester rifle balanced expertly in his hands. The sun behind him cast his face in shadow, but his stance was unwavering, the barrel of his rifle trained on the raiders. "This ain't your business, stranger," the taller raider called back, but Eliza could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "I'm making it my business," the stranger replied, edging his horse forward. As he moved closer, Eliza could make out his features, a strong jawline shadowed with stubble, piercing blue eyes that missed nothing, and a determined set to his mouth. His clothes were trail-worn but neat, the mark of a man who took pride in himself despite the hardships of life on the frontier. The shorter raider started to reach for his pistol, but froze when the stranger fired again, the bullet whizzing so close to his ear that he yelped. "I wouldn't," the stranger warned. "Let the lady go and ride out while you still can." For a moment, Eliza thought the raiders might fight. Then the taller one spat on the ground and shoved her away. She stumbled forward, nearly falling to her knees on the dusty street. "You just made yourself an enemy," the raider threatened as he backed toward his horse. The stranger didn't reply, keeping his rifle trained on them as they mounted up and galloped out of town, dust billowing behind them. Only when they were out of sight did the man lower his rifle and dismount in a fluid motion that spoke of years in the saddle. He approached Eliza cautiously, as if afraid of frightening her further. "Are you hurt, madam?" he asked, his voice gentler now. Eliza brushed dirt from her skirt, trying to compose herself. "No, thank you saved me," he nodded, extending a calloused hand to her. "Levi Lambert." "I was passing through when I heard your scream." She placed her trembling hand in his, surprised by the warmth of his grip. "Eliza Parker. My father owns the general store." Levi glanced around at the now empty street. A few faces peered from windows, but no one had ventured out to help. "Where is everyone?" Scared, Eliza said simply. "Those men have hit 3 towns in the last month. The sheriff was killed 2 weeks ago, and we haven't got a replacement yet." Levi frowned, his gaze moving to the horizon where the raiders had disappeared. "They'll be back." Men like that don't forget a slight. A chill ran through Eliza at his words. "What am I going to do? My father's away in Helena." Levi studied her for a long moment, then gestured to the store. "First, we secure your place, then we figure out how to keep you safe until help arrives." For the first time since the raiders had grabbed her, Eliza felt a flicker of hope. There was something about Levi Lambert that inspired confidence. Perhaps it was the steady way he held himself, or the calm in his voice even after the violence that had just occurred. Together they walked back to the general store, Levi leading his horse by the reins. The animal was a magnificent bay stallion, clearly well cared for despite the dust of the trail. "Are you a lawman?" Eliza asked as she unlocked the store's front door, which had been left ajar during the commotion. Levi tied his horse to the hitching post and shook his head. "No, madam, just a man who's seen enough injustice to know when to step in." Inside, the store was in disarray. The raiders had overturned several displays in their search for valuables, and the cash drawer hung open and empty. "They didn't get much," Eliza said, moving behind the counter to check the hidden safe. "Father took most of the money with him to purchase new inventory." Levi nodded, surveying the damage. "Those men weren't just after money, they meant to take you too." Eliza shuddered, hugging herself. "I know there have been stories, women taken from other towns." "I've heard those stories," Levi said grimly. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a revolver, checking it before placing it on the counter. "Do you know how to use one of these?" Eliza nodded. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was 16, insisting that a woman alone on the frontier needed to protect herself. "Yes, but I couldn't reach the shotgun under the counter before they grabbed me." "Keep this with you," Levi said, sliding the revolver toward her. "I'll help you clean up, then we need to talk about what happens next." For the next hour, they worked side by side, righting overturned shelves and sweeping up broken glass. Eliza kept glancing at Levi when she thought he wasn't looking, curious about this stranger who had come to her rescue. His movements were efficient and purposeful, and despite his rugged appearance, there was an intelligence in his eyes that hinted at depths beyond those of an ordinary drifter. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the store windows, Eliza brought out 2 cups of coffee from the small kitchen in the back. "Thank you," Levi said, accepting the steaming cup gratefully. "It's been a while since I've had a proper cup. Where are you headed?" Eliza asked, sitting across from him at a small table by the window. Levi's gaze drifted to the street outside, now quiet as the town battened down for the night. "Nowhere in particular. I've been drifting since the war between the states." Eliza asked, noting the subtle tightening around his eyes at the mention. "Yes, I was with the Union cavalry. After it ended, home didn't feel like home anymore." Eliza nodded, understanding more than he might expect. "My mother died during the war, fever. Father moved us west afterward, said he needed a fresh start." "And has it been a fresh start?" Eliza looked around the store that had been her home for the past 8 years. "It was until recently. These raiders have changed everything. People are afraid to go about their business. Some families have already packed up and left." Levi frowned. "Without a sheriff, the town's vulnerable. Those men will keep coming back, taking what they want. Father's been trying to convince the territorial governor to send a new lawman, but there's a shortage of qualified men willing to take on the job." Levi set down his coffee cup with a decisive thump. "I'll stay until your father returns. Make sure those raiders don't come back for you." Eliza's heart skipped a beat at his offer. "You don't have to do that, Mr. Lambert. You've done more than enough already." "Levi, please," he corrected with a slight smile that transformed his serious face. "And I do have to. I wouldn't sleep easy knowing I left you in danger." Something warm unfurled in Eliza's chest. Gratitude, certainly, but also something else she couldn't quite name. "Then I accept your help, Levi, and I insist you stay here. We have a spare room upstairs." Later that night, after showing Levi to the guest room that normally housed traveling salesmen, Eliza lay awake in her bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another person moving about in their home. The floorboards creaked occasionally as Levi paced, and she imagined him standing guard, keeping watch over the darkened town. Despite the day's terror, she felt strangely at peace knowing he was there. It had been just her and her father for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone else to rely on. Morning brought a sense of normalcy that seemed almost surreal after the previous day's events. Eliza rose early to prepare breakfast, finding Levi already awake and checking his weapons at the kitchen table. "I hope you slept well," she said, moving to stoke the stove. "Well enough," he replied, though the shadows under his eyes suggested otherwise. "Any signs of trouble in the night?" None that I heard. She cracked eggs into a bowl, watching him from the corner of her eye. Do you think they'll come back so soon? Levi reassembled his rifle with practiced ease. Hard to say. Men like that are unpredictable, but they know you're not alone now, which might make them think twice. As the day progressed, Eliza reopened the store, determined not to let fear rule her life. Levi remained close by, helping with tasks around the shop and keeping a watchful eye on the comings and goings in the street outside. The townspeople were curious about the stranger, and throughout the day, several came in with transparent excuses to buy goods while they sized up Levi. Eliza found herself explaining his presence repeatedly, noting with interest how the town's mood seemed to lift at the news that someone was standing against the raiders. By late afternoon, Mrs. Holloway, the baker's wife, was openly speculating about Levi's background as she purchased flour. "Such a handsome man," she whispered to Eliza when Levi stepped outside to check on his horse. "And those eyes, like the Montana sky itself. Is he spoken for, dear?" Eliza felt her cheeks warm. "I wouldn't know, Mrs. Holloway, he's just passing through." The older woman said with a knowing smile. "Well, a man doesn't risk his life for a stranger without good reason. Perhaps he'll find a reason to stay." The comment stayed with Eliza long after Mrs. Holloway had left. She found herself watching Levi more closely, the way his brow furrowed in concentration as he repaired a broken shelf. The gentle way he spoke to children who came into the store, the quiet competence in everything he did. That evening, as they again sat with coffee after closing the store, Eliza worked up the courage to ask the question that had been on her mind all day. "Why did you really help me yesterday? You could have ridden past and no one would have blamed you." Levi was silent for a long moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "During the war, I saw what happens when good people do nothing in the face of cruelty. I swore I'd never be that person, the one who rides past." "You could have been killed," Eliza pressed. His blue eyes met her steadily. "Some things are worth dying for, Miss Parker." "Eliza," she corrected softly. "If I'm to call you Levi, you must call me Eliza." A smile touched his lips. "Eliza, then." They sat in comfortable silence until a distant sound made Levi tense. "Did you hear that?" Eliza listened, then shook her head. "What is it?" Levi was already on his feet, moving to extinguish the lamps. Riders, several of them coming fast. Fear clutched at Eliza's heart as she hurried to help him darken the store. The raiders, possibly. "Get upstairs and stay away from the windows. Take the revolver." Eliza hesitated, not wanting to leave him alone. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you. Go." She hurried up the stairs, the revolver cold in her hand. From the upstairs hallway, she could see down the main street of Willow Creek. In the moonlight, she made out a group of riders approaching, at least 6 of them, moving with purpose. Levi appeared beside her, his rifle ready. "More than I expected," he said grimly. "We should warn the town," Eliza whispered. "No time, and it would only put others in danger." He guided her into her bedroom. "Stay here, away from the door and windows." "You can't face them alone," Eliza protested. Levi's expression was resolute. "I'm not planning to face them at all if I can help it. Sometimes the best defense is to make the enemy think there's nothing worth attacking." He slipped back out, and Eliza heard him moving quietly through the house, presumably checking that all was secure. Outside, the riders had reached the edge of town and were slowing their approach, spreading out as they moved down the main street. Eliza's heart pounded as she crouched by her bed, the revolver clutched in both hands to keep it steady. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as she waited, straining to hear any sound from below. Then came the crash of breaking glass, followed by muffled voices. They were in the store. "Search the place," a voice commanded. "Find the girl and that interfering bastard." Eliza's breath caught in her throat. They'd come for her specifically, and for Levi. She heard heavy footsteps moving through the store, the sound of items being knocked over in their search. "Upstairs," someone called, and the footsteps changed direction, heading for the staircase. Where was Levi? Had they already found him? Eliza raised the revolver, aiming at the bedroom door. She would not be taken without a fight. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, moving slowly now, checking rooms. Eliza steadied her breathing, finger poised on the trigger. Just as a shadow appeared beneath her door, A shot rang out from elsewhere in the house, followed by a cry of pain. The shadow disappeared as the man outside her room ran toward the commotion. More shots followed, and the sound of breaking furniture. Eliza couldn't stand it anymore. She had to know what was happening. Moving to her door, she eased it open just enough to peer out. The hallway was empty, but she could see movement downstairs. Gathering her courage, she slipped out of the bedroom and crept to the top of the stairs. The scene below was chaos. 2 raiders lay motionless on the floor, while others had taken cover behind overturned furniture. Levi was nowhere to be seen, but occasional shots from the back of the store told her he was still fighting. One of the raiders spotted her at the top of the stairs and raised his pistol. Eliza fired first, her shot going wide but forcing him to duck for cover. She retreated back down the hallway as bullets splintered the wood around her. "Eliza," Levi's voice called from somewhere below. The back stairs. Now, the Parker store had a narrow back staircase leading from the storeroom to the upper floor, used primarily for moving stock. Eliza ran for it, reaching the small door just as heavy footsteps thundered up the main staircase behind her. She descended the back stairs in darkness, her hand sliding along the wall for guidance. At the bottom, strong hands caught her, and she nearly screamed before recognizing Levi's touch. "This way," he whispered, guiding her through the storeroom to the back door. "My horse is ready." "We need to get out of town." "But the store," Eliza began, "is just a building," Levi finished firmly. "Your life matters more." Outside, Levi's bay stallion was waiting, already saddled. Behind them, angry voices called out as the raiders discovered their escape route. "Up you go," Levi said, boosting Eliza into the saddle before swinging up behind her. The horse needed no urging, springing forward into a gallop as shots rang out behind them. They rode hard through the night, following game trails away from the main roads. Levi's arms around Eliza as he held the reins were strong and steady, giving her a sense of security despite their desperate flight. Only when they were several miles from town, hidden in a stand of pines near a small creek, did Levi finally slow the horse to a walk. "We'll rest here until dawn," he said, dismounting and helping Eliza down. "Those men won't risk tracking us in the dark." Eliza sank to the ground, the events of the night catching up with her all at once. "They'll destroy the store," she said, her voice hollow. Levi knelt beside her, his face grave in the moonlight. "Maybe, but they were after you, Eliza, you specifically. Do you know why?" She shook her head, bewildered. "No, I'm nobody important. The leader, I got a good look at him. He had a scar across his right cheek." Eliza nodded slowly. "Yes, the taller one from yesterday. His name is Rance Dalton. He leads a gang that's been terrorizing this territory for months, but they don't usually target specific people unless there's a reason." "I've never heard the name before," Eliza insisted. "Why would he want me?" Levi sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, but we need to get you somewhere safe until we figure it out. When is your father due back?" "Tomorrow, if all went well in Helena. Then we'll head for the next town over at first light. Send a message to warn your father." Eliza wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the mild spring night. "Will you stay with me?" Levi's eyes softened as he looked at her. "Yes, I'll stay as long as you need me." He removed his coat and draped it around her shoulders, the warmth of his body still lingering in the fabric. The simple gesture of kindness nearly undid her, and she fought back tears. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Levi built a small, nearly smokeless fire, keeping it low to avoid detection. As they sat together in its meager warmth, Eliza found herself studying his profile, wondering about the man who had so suddenly become her protector. "Tell me about yourself," she said. "Where are you from originally?" Levi poked at the fire with a stick, sending up a small shower of sparks. "Ohio. My family had a farm near Columbus. Nothing grand, but it was home." "Do you ever think of going back?" A shadow crossed his face. "There's nothing to go back to. My parents died while I was fighting, and the farm was sold to pay their debts." "I'm sorry," Eliza said softly. "So you've been wandering ever since," he nodded. "Taking work where I could find it. Ranch hand scout, even tried my hand at mining for a spell. Nothing felt right." "What were you looking for?" Levi was quiet for so long that Eliza thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, Purpose, I suppose, a reason to stop moving. The simple honesty in his words touched something in Eliza. How many people went through life never admitting, even to themselves, what they truly sought? And have you found it? She asked. His eyes met hers across the fire, and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection that needed no words. I'm beginning to think I might, he said. They set out at dawn, riding double on Levi's horse. The next town, Cedar Ridge, was a half-day's ride away, a small but growing settlement that had thus far escaped the raiders' attention. As they rode, Eliza leaned back against Levi's chest, taking comfort in his solid presence. The events of the past 2 days had changed something fundamental in how she saw the world. The safety she had taken for granted was revealed as illusion, but in its place was a new awareness of her own strength and of the unexpected connections that could form in moments of crisis. They reached Cedar Ridge by midday, the small town bustling with activity. Unlike Willow Creek, Cedar Ridge had a sheriff, a fact proclaimed proudly by the sign on the jailhouse. Levi helped Eliza down from the horse in front of the sheriff's office, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Wait here," he said. "I'll speak to the sheriff, explain what's happened." Eliza nodded, watching as he entered the building. Around her, the town went about its business, unaware of the danger lurking just a day's ride away. She felt oddly disconnected from the normal life unfolding before her, women shopping, men working, children playing in the dusty street. Levi emerged from the sheriff's office with a tall, gray-haired man who wore a silver star on his vest. "Miss Parker," the sheriff said, extending his hand. "Sheriff Blackwood, Mr. Lambert here has told me about your situation. I'm mighty sorry for your troubles." "Thank you, Sheriff," Eliza replied, shaking his hand. "Have you heard of this Rance Dalton?" The sheriff's expression darkened. "Indeed I have. He's wanted in 3 territories, and there's a substantial reward for his capture, but he's slippery as an eel and twice as mean." "Any idea why he might target Miss Parker specifically?" Levi asked. Sheriff Blackwood stroked his mustache thoughtfully. "Hard to say. Dalton's known for holding grudges, but usually against those who have crossed him directly. I've never even met the man before yesterday," Eliza said. "Well, you're welcome to stay in Cedar Ridge until we sort this out. We've got a decent hotel, and I'll send a rider to Willow Creek to intercept your father." "Thank you, Sheriff," Levi said, "but I'd prefer if you kept Miss Parker's presence here quiet. The fewer people who know she's in Cedar Ridge, the better." The sheriff nodded his understanding. "Of course, I'll be discreet." After arranging for a room at the hotel under a false name, Levi and Eliza settled in to wait for news from Willow Creek. The hotel was modest but clean, with a small dining room where they took their evening meal. "Do you think my father will be safe?" Eliza asked as they ate, the worry she'd been suppressing all day finally spilling out. "What if the raiders are waiting for him?" "The sheriff's man will reach Willow Creek before your father returns," Levi assured her. "And your father strikes me as a careful man." "He is," Eliza agreed, thinking of her pragmatic, steady parent. George Parker had raised her alone after her mother's death, teaching her to be self-reliant without ever making her feel unloved. "He always says preparation beats luck every time." "Wise words," Levi said with approval. "My father used to say something similar: fortune favors the prepared mind." Eliza smiled, imagining a younger Levi listening to his father's advice. "What was he like, your father?" "Quiet, thoughtful. He loved books, always had one tucked away in his pocket." Levi's expression softened with memory. "He taught me to read by lantern light after the day's work was done." "You miss him," Eliza observed. "Every day." Levi met her gaze across the table. "What about your mother? Do you remember her?" Eliza nodded, touching the small locket she wore around her neck. "She was beautiful, not just in looks but in spirit." She could find joy in the smallest things: a wildflower growing through a crack in the sidewalk, the way sunlight fell through leaves. Even during the war, when everything was scarce, she never lost her ability to see beauty. "You have that same quality," Levi said softly. Eliza felt her cheeks warm at the unexpected compliment. "I try to. It's not always easy. The best qualities rarely are." His hand moved across the table, hesitating before covering hers. You've shown remarkable courage through all of this, Eliza. The touch of his hand sent a current through her that had nothing to do with fear or danger. For a brief moment, Eliza allowed herself to imagine a different reality, one where they had met under ordinary circumstances, perhaps at a town social or church gathering, where their growing feelings could unfold naturally without the shadow of threat hanging over them. But that wasn't their reality. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. For tonight, though, the simple connection of hand to hand was enough. Morning brought news Sheriff Blackwood's rider had returned with word that George Parker had indeed arrived back in Willow Creek, only to find his store damaged and his daughter missing. The raiders had ransacked the place, but had not burned it down, perhaps hoping Eliza would return. The sheriff had informed Mr. Parker of his daughter's whereabouts, and he was now on his way to Cedar Ridge. He should arrive by afternoon, the sheriff told them over breakfast at the hotel. I've also sent wires to the territorial marshal's office. With luck, they'll send deputies to help us deal with Dalton's gang. And if they don't, Levi asked, always practical. Sheriff Blackwood's weathered face was grim. Then we gather what men we can and handle it ourselves. I won't have raiders threatening towns in my jurisdiction. Eliza spent the morning in nervous anticipation, watching the road from the hotel window for any sign of her father. Levi stayed close, his quiet presence a comfort as the hours passed. When George Parker finally rode into town, Eliza rushed down to meet him, throwing herself into her father's arms the moment he dismounted. "Thank God you're safe," her father said, holding her tight. He was a tall man with graying hair and the same blue eyes as his daughter. Years of frontier living had weathered his face, but had not dimmed the intelligence in his gaze. Over Eliza's shoulder, he looked at Levi, who stood a respectful distance away. "You must be Lambert. The sheriff's man told me what you did. I'm in your debt, sir." Levi stepped forward, extending his hand. "No debt, Mr. Parker. I did what any decent man would do." George Parker clasped Levi's hand firmly. "Few men would face down Rance Dalton's gang for a stranger. You have my eternal gratitude." Inside the hotel, over coffee, Eliza and Levi recounted the events of the past 2 days. George listened intently, his expression darkening as they described the raiders' specific interest in Eliza. "I was afraid of this," he said when they finished, his voice heavy with regret. Eliza leaned forward. "Afraid of what, father? Do you know why they targeted me?" George sighed deeply, looking every one of his 58 years. "It's not you they're after, Eliza. It's me, or rather, what they think I have." "What do you mean?" Levi asked. 6 months ago, I was returning from a buying trip to Helena. I took shelter during a storm at her remote cabin. The man inside was wounded, shot in the side and burning with fever. I did what I could for him, but he died during the night." George paused, his hands tightening around his coffee cup. "Before he died, he told me he was on the run from Rance Dalton. He'd been part of Dalton's gang, but had stolen something valuable from him, a map to a gold cache the gang had hidden after their biggest robbery." "A map," Eliza repeated. "But what does that have to do with me?" "The dying man gave me the map," George continued. "Said I seemed like an honest man who might put the gold to better use than Dalton ever would. I took it, thinking I'd turn it over to the proper authorities. But before I could, I heard that Dalton was searching for anyone connected to his former gang member." "So you kept it hidden," Levi surmised. George nodded. "I locked it in our safe and told no one. I thought the matter had been forgotten." Then the raids began, getting closer to Willow Creek each time. "And they came for Eliza to force you to give up the map," Levi said, the pieces falling into place. "Yes, I should have destroyed it long ago." George turned to his daughter, his eyes filled with remorse. "I'm so sorry, Eliza. I never thought they'd come after you." Eliza reached across the table to take her father's hand. "You couldn't have known, father." "The map," Levi said, bringing them back to the practical matter at hand. "Where is it now?" "Still in the safe at the store." The raiders didn't find it. It's hidden behind a false panel. Sheriff Blackwood, who had joined them for the discussion, leaned forward. "This changes things. If Dalton wants that map badly enough to risk attacking a town in broad daylight, he won't stop coming after you both." "What do you suggest?" George asked. We use the map as bait, Levi said suddenly, his mind working through the problem. Set a trap for Dalton. Sheriff Blackwood nodded slowly. It could work with the right planning. It's too dangerous, Eliza protested, looking at Levi. These men have already tried to kill you once. Levi's eyes met hers, steady and determined. Sometimes the only way past danger is through it. If we don't stop Dalton now, you and your father will never be safe. The plan took shape over the next few hours. George would return to Willow Creek with Sheriff Blackwood and several deputies, ostensibly to secure the store and retrieve his belongings. Word would be allowed to spread that he was recovering valuable papers from his safe papers that would need to be transported back to Cedar Ridge. Dalton will expect us to move the map, Sheriff Blackwood explained. We'll give him what he expects, a small group traveling back to Cedar Ridge appearing vulnerable. But in reality, we'll have men positioned along the route, Levi added. When Dalton's gang attacks, they'll find themselves surrounded. Eliza listened to the men plan, a knot of fear tightening in her stomach. So much could go wrong. If the raiders arrived in greater numbers than expected, or if they attacked before the trap was fully set. I want to come with you, she said when there was a pause in the discussion. Absolutely not, her father replied immediately. You'll stay here where it's safe. Father, he's right, Eliza, Levi interrupted gently. The plan only works if Dalton believes he can use you to force your father's hand. If you're already with us, he loses that leverage. Eliza wanted to argue further, but the logic was undeniable. Still, the thought of waiting behind while others risked their lives on her behalf was almost unbearable. Promise me you'll be careful, she said, looking directly at Levi. All of you. We will, Levi assured her, and something in his eyes told her he understood exactly what she wasn't saying, that her concern for him went beyond simple gratitude. The next morning, as the men prepared to leave for Willow Creek, Eliza stood with Levi by the stables, away from the others. I have something for you, she said, pressing a small object into his hand. It was her mother's locket, the gold warm from being held in her palm. Levi looked down at it, then back at her in surprise. Eliza, I can't take this, it's your mother's. It's a loan, she corrected. I expect it back when you return. Understanding dawned in his eyes. She was giving him a reason to come back, a promise between them. I'll guard it with my life, he said softly, slipping the locket into his shirt pocket. Not your life, Eliza said firmly. Just bring it back to me. That's all I ask. Impulsively, she rose on her tiptoes and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. His skin was warm beneath her lips, the stubble of his beard rough against her skin. For luck, she whispered, stepping back. Levi's eyes darkened, and for a moment Eliza thought he might pull her close again. Instead, he took her hand and raised it to his lips in a gesture that belonged to another time, another world. I'll come back to you, Eliza Parker. You have my word. The next 2 days were the longest of Eliza's life. She stayed at the hotel under the watchful eye of a deputy sheriff, jumping at every sound, imagining the worst with each passing hour. By the evening of the second day, with no word from Willow Creek, her nerves were stretched to breaking. She was sitting by the window of her room, watching the street below, when the sound of horses made her heart leap into her throat. Running downstairs, she burst onto the hotel porch just as a group of riders came into view. At their head rode Levi, dusty and weary, but very much alive. Beside him was her father, and behind them, several deputies escorting 3 bound men prisoners. Eliza didn't remember rushing down the steps. She was only aware of Levi dismounting and opening his arms just in time to catch her as she flew into them. You're safe, she breathed, hardly daring to believe it. You're all safe. Thanks to Mr. Lambert here, her father said as he joined them. His plan worked perfectly. Dalton took the bait and we were ready for him. Levi's arms tightened around Eliza briefly before he set her gently back on her feet. Not perfectly. Dalton himself got away, though we captured 3 of his men, but with his gang scattered, he'll be on the run for a long while. The territorial marshal is sending men to track him down, Sheriff Blackwood added as he dismounted. It's only a matter of time now. Later, after the prisoners had been secured in the jailhouse and the events of the ambush recounted in detail over dinner, Eliza found herself alone with Levi on the hotel's small back porch. The spring night was mild, stars scattered like diamond dust across the dark sky. "I have something that belongs to you," Levi said, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing her mother's locket. Eliza shook her head, not taking it. "Keep it a little longer, at least until we know Dalton has been captured." Levi studied her face in the dim light spilling from the hotel windows. "Are you asking me to stay?" "Yes," Eliza said simply. "Father says the store will need repairs after what the raiders did. We could use help." A smile touched Levi's lips. "Is that the only reason?" Eliza felt a blush warm her cheeks, but she met his gaze steadily. "No, it's not the only reason." Levi stepped closer, one hand coming up to touch her cheek. "I've been wandering a long time, Eliza, never staying anywhere, never letting myself get attached. But from the moment I saw you fighting those raiders, something changed." "For me too," Eliza admitted. "I've never met anyone like you, Levi Lambert." His thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone, his touch feather-light. "I can't promise it will be easy. Dalton is still out there and there may be other dangers." "Life is never without risk," Eliza said, "but some risks are worth taking." When he kissed her, it was gentle at first, a question, an offering. Then, as she responded, it deepened into something more certain, a promise of things to come. His arms around her felt like coming home after a long journey, and Eliza knew with sudden clarity that whatever the future held, they would face it together. Summer came to Willow Creek, bringing with it new beginnings. The Parker General Store had been repaired and expanded, now offering not only goods, but also services for the growing town. Word had come from the territorial marshal that Rance Dalton had been captured trying to cross into Canada and would face justice for his crimes. On a perfect June evening, beneath an arbor of wild roses in the garden behind the store, Eliza Parker became Eliza Lambert in a small ceremony attended by the townspeople who had come to admire the couple's courage and devotion. "I never expected to find you," Levi said as they danced under lantern light, his voice for her ears alone. "A purpose, a home, a love like this, it's more than I dared hope for." Eliza smiled up at him, her heart full to bursting. "Remember what you told me that first night. Some things are worth dying for, I remember." She laid her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I've discovered something even more important." "What's that?" he asked, his lips brushing her hair. "Some things are worth living for," Eliza said. "And loving you is at the top of that list." As the stars came out above Willow Creek, the music played on, and two souls that had found each other against all odds danced into their future, a future bright with promise and possibility, built on courage, sacrifice, and a love that had begun in danger but would flourish in peace.